Todos bienvenidos a la ceremonia de apertura del Simposio de Ciberseguridad de la OEA 2020. Queremos darles la bienvenida a todos y todas las que se unen en apoyar los esfuerzos del programa de ciberseguridad de la OEA, del Comité Interamericano contra el Terrorismo y de la Organización de los Estados Americanos. Mi nombre es Gabriela Montes de Oca y voy a ser la maestra de ceremonias del evento. En primer lugar, vamos a tener interpretación simultánea durante este evento. Por favor, les pedimos que hagan clic sobre el globo para poder tener interpretación a español, portugués y francés. Este evento va a ser transmitido en inglés. Next, please. De igual forma, queremos expresar que las opiniones expresadas en esta presentación no necesariamente reflejan las visiones de la Secretaría General de la Organización de los Estados Americanos o de sus Estados miembros. The opinions expressed in this presentation do not necessarily reflect of its member states. And last but not least, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter so you can stay up to date with our updates. Before we begin, my name is Gabriela Montes de Oca, as I mentioned before, and I would like to thank you all for being here. And on behalf of the Organization of American States, I would also like to thank our donors and partners, specifically the World Economic Forum, Cisco, AWS, Microsoft, and the governments of Canada and the United States. To begin our opening ceremony, I will give the floor to the Secretary of Multidimensional Security, Mr. Arthur Weintraub. Mr. Secretary, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. En nombre de la Secretaría General de la Organización de los Estados Americanos, tengo el honor de darles la bienvenida a la quinta edición del Simposio de Ciberseguridad, organizado por el Programa de Ciberseguridad de la OEA SICTE, con el apoyo de múltiples colaboradores y donantes. En primer lugar, queremos agradecer a los gobiernos de Estados Unidos y Canadá por su continuo apoyo y colaboración. También a Valecia, Maclin, Kirstjen Nielsen, Michael Timmeny, Troels, Oerting, Jorgensen y Bill Shin, los ponentes que hoy nos acompañan, al igual al equipo de la OEA que ha hecho que este encuentro sea posible. Es ya obvio resaltar la relevancia de Internet en nuestras sociedades y aún más en la pandemia de COVID-19, la cual nos ha llevado a digitalizar aún más nuestras vidas. No parecen tan obvias para el público en general que las amenazas del mundo analógico se le suman ahora nuevos avances tecnológicos que a su vez generan nuevas amenazas para todos y cada uno de los que hacemos vida en Internet. Actualmente, el ciberdelito para América Latina y el Caribe tiene un costo anual de entre 15.000 millones y 30.000 millones de dólares en 2017. Es decir, entre 0,28% y 0,57% del PIB de la región, de acuerdo al Centro de Estudios Internacionales Estratégicos, CSIS en sus siglas en inglés. Asimismo, los países de la región no solo son un objeto de ataques en línea, sino también una fuente activa de ellos, según reportes de esta entidad. El aumento de los riesgos cibernéticos está obligando a las empresas y los gobiernos a integrar la ciberseguridad en el tejido de sus procesos, la adquisición de tecnología y la selección de personal. Asimismo, si consideramos que más de 50% de las empresas de Latinoamérica y el Caribe entran dentro de la categoría PYMES, de acuerdo con la Corporación Andina de Fomento, nos encontramos ante un panorama complejo que requiere de todos los esfuerzos posibles para crear un ciberespacio más seguro. A pesar de lo real de estas amenazas, sigue habiendo una escasez global de profesionales de la ciberseguridad. Solo en la región de América Latina, la brecha de la fuerza laboral en ciberseguridad es de aproximadamente 600.000 personas, según el ISC de 2019. Es por ello por lo que en 2020, iniciativas como el Simposio de Ciberseguridad, así como otras iniciativas de concientización de la OEA, así como las acciones que nuestros colaboradores y donantes realizan en pro de la ciberseguridad en la región son tan importantes. La tecnología está cambiando de forma exponencial cada día y las amenazas que rodean esas tecnologías se están volviendo cada vez más sofisticadas. Nuestra creciente conectividad y dependencia de las plataformas y servicios basados en Internet ha aumentado considerablemente nuestra exposición al riesgo derivado de la ciberdelincuencia, al igual que otras amenazas cibernéticas. De igual forma, en medio de la pandemia actual, hemos visto un incremento en el uso de las plataformas digitales para realizar acciones cotidianas que antes solíamos hacer de manera presencial, como estudiar, trabajar, comprar provisiones, pagar cuentas, entre otras. También vemos múltiples organizaciones, compañías, colegios, instituciones de educación superior han tenido que reinventarse y adaptarse a la situación actual, con la ayuda de las plataformas digitales, para que todos podamos continuar trabajando, prestando servicios y estudiando de forma remota. Para combatir estas amenazas, es imperativo un cambio estructural en torno a la ciberseguridad. Sin embargo, este cambio solo será posible con coordinación y liderazgos nacionales, así como con la participación activa de los distintos sectores de la sociedad en ese proceso. Por eso, hoy, más que nunca, debemos enfocarnos en mantenernos seguros en línea. Para hacer frente a esta realidad, desde la OEA, el Programa de Ciberseguridad del Comité Interamericano contra el Terrorismo, CICTE, ha apoyado a los Estados miembros de la OEA en torno a 3 pilares: el desarrollo de políticas públicas, el fortalecimiento de las capacidades de ciberseguridad de nuestros Estados miembros, y 3, la promoción de la generación de conocimiento. A través de las diferentes ediciones del simposio, no solamente hemos podido continuar con nuestra labor en torno a esos 3 pilares, sino también hemos corroborado en el gran interés que existe en la región alrededor de mejorar nuestras capacidades de ciberseguridad. La 4ª edición del Simposio de Ciberseguridad, llevada a cabo en septiembre de 2019 en Santiago, Chile, involucró la participación de más de 1.000 profesionales de ciberseguridad, incluyendo especialistas de Fuerzas de Seguridad del Estado, autoridades policiales, formuladores de políticas y técnicos de equipo de respuesta incidentes cibernéticos, CERT, de más de 15 países. Este año, la versión online del Simposio de Ciberseguridad cuenta con la participación de cerca de 2.000 profesionales de todos los países de la región. Tendremos 4 talleres técnicos enfocados en temas como respuestas a incidentes, desarrollo de políticas nacionales de ciberseguridad, investigaciones y forense digital. En esta quinta edición del Simposio de Ciberseguridad, hemos intentado involucrar a más participantes de otras regiones del mundo, a la formación de una red global de conocimiento y fomentando una mayor colaboración e interacción al nivel mundial en materia de ciberseguridad. Asimismo, este evento se alinea a nuestra estrategia integral para el fortalecimiento de capacidades en la región. Por ello, tiene como objetivo primordial formar especialistas de equipos de respuestas a incidentes, agentes de aplicación de la ley, formuladores de políticas, miembros de la sociedad civil y operadores de infraestructura crítica. A lo largo de sus ediciones, el simposio ha demostrado tener un rol protagónico en la promoción del intercambio de experiencias entre los participantes y en la formación de una red de conocimiento entre las Américas y otras regiones del mundo. Y esperemos que no sea distinto para esta edición. En un mundo interconectado, donde las amenazas cibernéticas adquieren mayor complejidad y dinamismo, esta red de conocimiento y contacto resulta clave en la lucha contra la ciberdelincuencia y el ciberterrorismo. Sabemos que los cibercriminales no paran durante esta pandemia, por lo que nosotros continuaremos capacitando, formando y apoyando a los ciudadanos de nuestros Estados miembros para que se apasionen por la ciberseguridad y nos ayuden a crear un ciberespacio más seguro. Desde el programa de ciberseguridad de la OEA CICTE, nos complace apoyar a nuestros Estados miembros a través de diferentes iniciativas de formación y desarrollo de capacidades, así como darles la bienvenida a todos que forman parte de este evento y nos acompañan hoy. Este es el objetivo común que nos une a todos los que impulsamos estos proyectos. Crear plataformas que apoyen a los ciudadanos de las Américas en su desarrollo profesional en el sector de la ciberseguridad. En conclusión, desde la OEA consideramos necesario enfocarnos en 3 acciones fundamentales: la creación de conciencia alrededor de las amenazas cibernéticas existentes, la promoción de acciones multisectoriales y la cooperación internacional para continuar generando marcos legales que se adapten a las nuevas amenazas cibernéticas. Permítanme concluir reiterando nuestro agradecimiento a los ponentes, colaboradores y donantes que han hecho posible este evento. Estamos seguros de que, a través de iniciativas y eventos como el Simposio de Ciberseguridad, podremos seguir trabajando para fortalecer las capacidades de nuestros Estados miembros en materia de ciberseguridad, con el objetivo de construir un ciberespacio más seguro. Les deseo a todos un exitoso y productivo Simposio de Ciberseguridad 2020. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Secretario. Thank you very much, Secretary. To begin with our speakers, I will now introduce Valecia Maclin. Valecia Maclin is General Manager for Engineering, Customer Security, and Trust at Microsoft, where she is responsible for advancing customers' trust in Microsoft products and services. Through the engineering solution, Microsoft Digital Crimes Unit, and corporate-wide security development lifecycle governance. Prior to Microsoft, Maclin led large mission-critical programs in cybersecurity and national security in support of multiple intelligence agencies. She holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering and Material Science from Duke University, a Master of Science degree in the Management of Technology from the University of Pennsylvania, and multiple professional certifications including PMP, CISSP, ISSMP, GS from Master. Maclin is also a member of multiple boards advancing cybersecurity and minorities in engineering. Valecia, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully this is the beauty of the virtual world that we're all in. Let's see. It should share in just a moment. So again, thank you so much, Gabriella, for that kind introduction. It is indeed my honor to have this invitation from the Organization of American States to participate in your 5th edition of the Cybersecurity Symposium. Microsoft has an over 20-year history with OAS, and it is my pleasure to join you in this very necessary event. Not only from my role leading efforts engineering solutions at Microsoft, but again, from a long career delivering nation-scale information and cybersecurity solutions to protect national security and economic viability. This year, we've leveraged technology to be resilient through challenging odds, and yet it is this basis of this resilience that makes leaning into what I'll call cybersecurity by design so critical. 2020 has been unprecedented and historic in many ways. From COVID-19 reverberating around the globe, creating seismic shifts in how we interact, while reminding us that we are truly a global society. We've been confronted with natural disasters exacerbated by climate changes, including a tumultuous hurricane season in our own hemisphere. In the midst of a global pandemic, and despite the isolation, we've also seen a rise in social unrest, including one of a particular personal context for me here in the US. Even in the midst of all of these challenges, technology has been pivotal in digitally transforming our lives as we increasingly move to a new normal that includes virtual meetings and virtual conferences like this one, virtual schooling of our children, virtual graduations, and the expansion of automation has led to us increasingly being dependent on the advances in technology and what it renders in our everyday lives. So while we may be isolated, we are still incredibly interconnected. In the midst of this interconnected ecosystem, while it's not new, we've undergone a digital transformation that increases the exchange of data that we depend on and use to influence our life and our decisions. It drives how governments interact with its citizens, how large and small businesses provide goods and services. And while we've grown dependent and familiar on this digital transformation, unfortunately, we've grown equally familiar with cyber threats that impact security, intellectual property, personal data, data privacy, and economic prosperity. We live in this interconnected ecosystem, and yet public and private organizations alike are unaware or often unprepared to defend against cyber threats. Improving resiliency to cyber threats is essential, not just from a security perspective, but because doing so is fundamental to the economic development and stability within our global community. We're interconnected, and so a risk in one component of our global supply chain increasingly adds risk to others. It is critical for organizations to understand their cybersecurity risk posture, and yet many do not know until they have been attacked or learn too late precautions that could have been taken to prevent financial, personal, or customer loss. When the risks from cyber attacks are not mitigated, they degrade public trust and access to essential services. Strengthening cybersecurity should be implemented by design and not just as an aftermath. Consider that we are accustomed to emergency response plans for natural disasters, excuse me. Or for even a simpler analogy, think of the protections one takes in their home to prevent theft, locking doors, identifying visitors before granting entry to the home, knowing how to contact first responders in the event of an emergency. It is even more critical to have knowledge and plans on how to protect data and information systems. For the question should not be if there is a breach to your systems, but more accurately, when. And therefore, having a plan in place to respond, along with mechanisms in place to protect against data loss from cybersecurity risk, just as you would prepare to defend against physical loss. It starts with identifying valued assets, understanding the risks for those assets to cyber threats, mitigating those risks, and having plans to respond, including who to engage for incident response. Establishing the security baseline and defining governance around it is an essential first step to cybersecurity resiliency. Frameworks like the National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, and equally their recently released Secure Software Development Framework, are key starting points for setting security baselines and governance. In the US, the Department of Defense has even recently instituted a cybersecurity maturity model certification, which all defense industrial-based companies, all 300,000 of them, will be expected to achieve in order to demonstrate a level of cybersecurity maturity that protects national interests and assets. A model of this is how we approach security by design at Microsoft. We're really focused on engineering in 4 different ways. The first involves identity and access management. We've implemented intelligence-based monitoring so that you know what assets are accessing your network. Together with 2-factor authentication, it strengthens access and identity management. It then goes to information protection, protecting the information itself, controls to protect sensitive and confidential information that should be automatically protected. And of course, despite the best solutions, there's always going to be threats and attacks are going to happen. They're a daily fact of life for all of us. Maintaining a focus on threat protection, threat identification, and also having an end-to-end security management structure with all of these components integrated help provide the steps to stay one step ahead. But unfortunately, there are going to continue to be threats. Attackers are smart, they're creative, they're well-financed, and they're not limited by borders. The cross-border nature of cybercrime creates safe havens for criminals who operate outside our jurisdictions. But increased sophistication also adds to the threat. What we need to do is to continue to work together so that as we develop secure baselines and reduce the impact of those threats when they hit our systems, we can be cyber resilient. So again, those security baselines are a key component of having requirements that aim at how you manage your organizational security risk. In this time of COVID, where digital connectivity has increased the importance for global interactions, we at Microsoft have continued to invest our resources to help protect our customers and partners around the world. So we continue to identify, track, and build proactive protections against cyber threats in all of our products. Given our unique position, we, particularly during COVID, have shared with the entire security community COVID-19 related threat intelligence that's derived from our over 8 trillion signals that we get each day from our ecosystem. And we've also expanded our support for nonprofits and healthcare providers, expanding our account guard service so that they can receive top of the range protection at this very critical time. Today, we're monitoring over 2 million accounts for nation state attacks. And as I prepare to close my remarks, I'd like to also lean in on a different perspective of this year from all of the historic shifts. With this acceleration of digital transformation, we've seen an increase of our dependency with 2 years of transformation in months' time. However, with these advances, COVID-19 has also enabled us to witness an exacerbation of the digital divide that has highlighted inequities, particularly in underserved communities and women, increasing levels of global poverty and unemployment. Some predictions indicate that global unemployment could reach 250 million people by the end of this year. That is a staggering figure. A broad economic recovery will be needed that will also require, in part, the development of new skills among a substantial part of the global workforce. Many old jobs may be lost forever, but new opportunity exists to learn the skills desperately needed around the world to enable the expanded use of digital technology and resiliency to the threats and risks that occur because we're more dependent on that technology. At Microsoft, we've launched a global skills initiative aimed at bringing digital skills to 25 million people worldwide by the end of the year. As we're leaning in and we are working together, and again, I'm so proud of the 5th year of OAS putting on this symposium so that we can continue to collaborate together on improving our cybersecurity resilience, leaning in on security by design, and also preparing a new normal for a global society that needs to build up cybersecurity skills and technology skills. Thank you so much for allowing me to share with you today, and I wish you a wonderful conference.
Thank you very much, Valecia, and we also look forward from the OAS to keep collaborating by this mentioned before. Our next speaker is Ms. Kirstjen Nielsen. Kirstjen Nielsen is an internationally recognized expert and proven leader in addressing critical global security issues, including emerging threats in cybersecurity. Ms. Nielsen's breadth of experience stands at the crossroads of policy, strategy, and operations, providing her with a unique perspective on risk across complex enterprise environments. Currently, Ms. Nielsen advises investors and technology companies on risk and resiliency, private technology use cases, and the mitigation of potential threats or vulnerabilities posed by new technologies. Ms. Nielsen has had various roles in government and most recently served as the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, where she oversaw 240,000 law enforcement, civilian, and military employees and a $70 billion annual budget. She previously served as a White House Principal Deputy Chief of Staff, and she has worked across the globe as a speaker, author, and thought leader to promote government, nonprofit, and private an advisory board member of multiple technology companies and various public-private policy boards, including the World Economic Forum's Center for Cybersecurity. Kirstjen, we are honored to have you open this symposium, and the floor is yours.
My apologies. Thank you for that. Thank you, Gabriela, for that kind introduction. Distinguished colleagues, good morning. I want to thank and congratulate Secretary Weintraub and the OAS Committee Against Terrorism, and specifically Belisario Contreras and the Cybersecurity Program for hosting this important conference and for bringing together experts from around the world from both the private and public sectors. Special thanks to Gabriela and her team for their efforts in ensuring this virtual symposium is engaging and addresses today's top cybersecurity issues. So it's my pleasure to speak this morning about the importance of elevating cybersecurity as a critical government priority and as a global challenge that requires building resilience and uniting efforts. Let me begin by talking a bit about the changing face of cybersecurity. Some of my remarks mimic those that were so well said by Valencia before me, but let me just walk through at a high level where we are. Our response to the global pandemic underscores that the world has gone digital, and the way we live, work, learn, explore, and relate to each other has been forever changed. As we go about our daily lives, constantly reaching for our smartphone or tablet, we delight in learning that yes, there is an app for that. With the burgeoning Internet of Things, really the Internet of everything, we are not only digitally dependent, but hyper-connected with each other, with devices, with data, and with our physical world. Our heightened reliance on digital connectivity and growing interdependencies are leading to single points of failure, concentrated dependencies, and cross-cutting functionality that can be exploited. And nefarious actors are leveraging and exploiting the seams and new vulnerabilities created by our increased connectivity. As the capabilities of adversaries strengthen, the volume of consequences and potential consequences is also exponentially increasing. We have moved well beyond simple data theft and information gathering to cyber activities that can result in actual physical destruction. Today's cyber risk is both global and systemic. With the increasing convergence of physical and cyberspace and the ability to attack either through the other, disruption of critical infrastructure functions and services can have profound effects in the virtual and physical world. Core critical capabilities have myriad applications and interdependencies. If disrupted or corrupted, the effects could be catastrophic, such as those, for example, that could result from a successful disruption of position navigation and timing systems. PNTS enables everything from GPS to microsurgery to transportation, agriculture, payment and settlement systems, and so much more. The resulting cascading and unintended consequences will be difficult to predict or to quantify. And the adversaries, be they nation-state-backed hackers or criminals, continue to focus on areas where they can sow the most discord and chaos, reap the greatest financial benefit, and in some cases cripple the essential functions of a nation adversary. COVID-19 related phishing emails are being sent as I speak, and hackers continue to attack our hospitals, pharmaceutical companies, and the healthcare industry writ large. In June, Microsoft reported that COVID-19 themed attacks through the use of phishing or social engineering had jumped to 20 to 30,000 a day in the United States alone. In July, cybersecurity officials from the US, UK, and Canada issued a warning about a nation-state's efforts to target vaccine research and development organizations. And nation-states are not waiting for declared war. Outside of recognized hostilities, adversary nation-states are now taking the fight directly to citizens through cyberspace, stealing their data, attacking their devices, compromising essential functions, and seeking to destabilize the heart of the democracies that we depend on through counterinformation and malicious influence campaigns. It is simply not a fair fight. Neither private companies nor citizens are equipped to wage a battle against such nation states. I could continue to describe the evolving risks, but suffice it to say that in today's environment, cybersecurity is national security. Cybersecurity is economic security, and cybersecurity is public health, security, and safety. Any one of these national responsibilities would require that governments continue to elevate cybersecurity as a national priority, but together they make it a mandate. Governments must include cybersecurity as the backbone of any agenda, and we must partner together. I will speak to that shortly. With that mandate as a reference, today I want to focus on two cyber-related risks: data integrity and election security, and the need for government and collective action to address both. While we must continue to protect data's confidentiality and ensure its availability, we must also realize that in this digital era, we live in a world where reality itself is up for debate. With deep fakes, GPS spoofing, and bot-created content, what is truth? When seeing is no longer believing, what we believe we know must be questioned. This is a pernicious threat, one that poisons our ability to efficiently and effectively react to the world around us. Criminals are able to lure us with emails appearing to be from friends and family, or appearing to pertain to information we need or want to know, which is why we continue to see emails related to phishing and COVID. Those who seek to sow chaos are able to manipulate our beliefs and emotions through sentiment manipulation. Nation states use false information to corral and control populations. With GPS spoofing, ships are forced to delay their arrivals and supply chains falter. There is a quote often attributed to Winston Churchill: "A lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on." This is certainly true today, and the implications are profound. Breaking the trust that what we see is real, nefarious actors are able to sow discord and confusion and undermine our institutions. And problem solving and decision making become much more difficult and drawn out as we search for the kernel of truth with which to begin the analysis. Our systems themselves run on data, and so when the data is corrupted, so is the output or service provided by the network, program, or system. For example, if the data underlying a supervisory system is corrupted, say through a false data injection, the intended function could be severely disrupted or eliminated. Data alteration and corruption themselves surely pose a systemic risk. We must seek new approaches to function and data redundancy, data segmentation and authentication. We need technologies that embed auditability into the data itself at its creation, assessment, transfer, and storage phases. And now let me move to a stark warning in part about data integrity, in part about infrastructure resilience. Our democracies themselves are in the crosshairs. Of course, a top-of-mind example for me is the egregious Russian interference in the 2016 US election. Moscow launched a brazen influence campaign to undermine public faith in our democratic process and to distort our presidential election. That campaign was multifaceted and involved cyber espionage, leaks of stolen data, cyber intrusions into voter registration systems, online propaganda and misinformation, and more. Although no actual votes were changed in 2016, let me be clear in this. We should consider any attempt to interfere in our elections as a direct attack on our democracies. It is unacceptable and it cannot be tolerated. As countries in our hemisphere look to their next elections, we see multiple nation states actively trying to sow discord and probing election infrastructure systems. I want to congratulate and thank the Cyber Program and the UK Foreign and Commonwealth Office for their vital, timely, and thoughtful report, Cybersecurity Considerations for the Democratic Process for Latin America and the Caribbean. Bringing together all 34 independent states of the Americas, we must shine the light on disinformation and information manipulation. We cannot afford to be lazy about where and how we receive our news, and we cannot afford to fall into social media traps that focus on speed over accuracy. I echo the report's recommendations on educating the public. We must identify and validate the sources from which we ingest our reality, question authenticity, and promote transparency and accountability. As stated in the report, there is a need to not only educate the public on how cyber incidents may affect democratic processes as a whole, but also to develop tools that can be useful to politicians, citizens, and the media, and to better protect electoral institutions against cyber attacks. We must ensure that governments have the capabilities and tools they need to protect against cyber attacks aimed at election infrastructure, to include voter databases, software, network connections, and results reporting mechanisms. We must be able to assure our citizens that their vote was counted and was counted correctly. As the report states, the very fabric of a stable digital society requires the protection of the networks and devices that support democratic processes. So how do we address systemic cyber threats, protect our elections, and ensure data integrity? I would offer an easy and hard answer. We do it together. I have continuously learned in my years focused on cybersecurity that the antidote to systemic risk is resilience and collective defense. I describe resilience as a journey, not a destination, and collective defense as the way we operationalize resilience. In fact, in this complex risk environment, no one entity has all of the capabilities, capacity, and authorities needed to combat today's cyber threats. I was asked to speak about the need to elevate cybersecurity as a critical government priority. I've discussed a few of the risks that require continuous government attention. In response to today's cyber risk, governments should serve as resilience enablers, as enforcers when needed, as assessors and sharers of threat intel, as promoters of best practices, requirements developers, and as sentries foreseeing threats emerging on the horizons. And there are many areas that government could and should pursue to strengthen our mutual cybersecurity, such as interdependency modeling, critical function identification, cascading consequence analysis, vulnerability disclosure regimes, and of course, automated sharing of threat indicators and countermeasures. The truth is, however, that cybersecurity is a team sport, and we can only effectively proceed in partnership with governments, private sector, citizens, academia, nonprofit community, tech developers, NGOs, and international organizations. The list goes on. We each have a role to play. We must bring a multi-jurisdictional and multidisciplinary approach to this challenge. And there's much to do together. We are dangerously overdue in collectively advancing responsible state behavior in cyberspace. In a constantly and quickly changing environment, we must agree to some rules in the road and plan how we will work cooperatively to determine when cyber activity that disrupts international security has occurred and by whom it was executed. And collective action led by governments is the only way to reach consensus on what is true and in time. There may be times when back channels may not be enough, when the attribution of an attack, say on civilian infrastructure, must be accurate lest it trigger unwarranted escalations or aggressions towards the wrong party. And we must also work together to ensure that governments replace complacency with consequences, that hostile actors, be they nation states or criminals, be held accountable. Secondly, we must work together to increase capability and capacity to address the weakest link problem. As I have often said, if we prepare individually, we will fail collectively. I applaud OAS's capacity building activities and look forward to hearing updates during this symposium. And finally, beyond setting expectations for state behavior, we must, as a community, develop and promote new evolving best practices and standards to manage evolving cyber risk and the security and resilience of our critical infrastructure. As I close, I urge us to keep talking and sharing, governments to governments, in international forums and in public-private partnerships. We must all serve as sentinels to protect the very lifeblood of our democracies, and we must move faster. If we see an emerging threat, it is foolish to think of it as anything other than an existing threat we don't yet know how to counteract. Tomorrow's threats are here today, morphing and growing stronger and more unpredictable, and our mutual resolve must match its ferocity. Again, I thank the Cybersecurity Program for bringing us together in this symposium. I'd ask that we consider these events as a call to action, that we all play our role, and I look forward to the discussions today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kirstjen. I am very happy to also comment that we have reached 1,000 participants who are now connected. So I believe that your last message of this event being a call to action for everyone to get involved in cybersecurity through these efforts that the organizations that we have here today are doing to improve cybersecurity. With that said, it is my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Michael Timmeny from Cisco. As Senior Vice President and Chief Government Strategy Officer, Mr. Michael Timmeny leads Cisco's government relations and oversees the country digital acceleration program worldwide. He manages a global team charged with advancing issues that support Cisco's robust corporate and technology policy agenda. Michael is focused on strength around the globe, expanding his team's presence in Cisco's growth markets and driving positive results for Cisco, as well as the governments and constituencies in which it operates. He is the country sponsor for Ireland and the United Arab Emirates, two key markets for Cisco. Additionally, he serves on the boards of Cisco's employee-sponsored Political Action Committee in the US, EPAC. Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriela, for an introduction that both my mother and my boss will very much like. So good morning, everyone, in this growing audience. It's a real honor for me to participate in the Organization of American States annual Cybersecurity Symposium on behalf of Cisco, and to be with so many leaders from the hemisphere. The Organization of American States has a proud history of consolidating democracy in the Western Hemisphere, promoting and protecting human rights, and fostering integral development and multidimensional security. This includes, of course, the organization's remarkable cybersecurity work. Cisco is grateful to the OAS collaboration and dedication to address this important issue, critical to enabling the digital economy. First and foremost, I would like to thank Secretary Weintraub for helping spearhead this effort. And thank you also, Gabriela, for all of your efforts. Also, I would like to express the appreciation of my boss, Cisco Chairman and CEO Chuck Robbins, for the dedicated and tireless work by all of you and the OAS. I want to recognize Secretary Nielsen. I particularly liked her characterization of this effort as a team sport, which I think is exactly on point. And I'd like to also thank Troels, who is representing the World Economic Forum. And I'm proud to see the other representatives from the tech industry with us, Valecia from Microsoft and Bill from Amazon Web Services. And although we would have preferred to be together in person, this first ever virtual OAS Cybersecurity Symposium is representative of what is possible through the use of technology. Think about it. There are over 1,000 attendees across 2 continents who have gathered together this morning, and yet none of us has had a long flight, a bland dinner on a plane, or even a layover. Geography is no longer a limitation. We are able to meet with people from all over the world on the same day, often within the same hour. The situation is presenting forward-thinking leaders with unique opportunities to advance their digital economy and promote digital inclusion, from remote work to distant learning to telemedicine. Businesses are needing to deploy reliable, secure technologies that facilitate remote workforces, ensuring business continuity and productivity. To foster this, governments should determine what fiscal measures and advice may enable businesses to deploy remote work solutions. Technology is also playing a central role in improving access to vital healthcare services, which is really urgent, especially during this pandemic. But major investments are needed to better facilitate remote access to healthcare and social care. And with technology, learning is no longer bound by walls, location, or time. The traditional classroom has constraints, particularly during emergencies, and new education models are proving successful. Investment in technologies to enable these new learning models will open new doors to education and opportunities. As you can see, the COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to reimagine the future. Embracing this new normal has more of the world online than ever before, and it has highlighted 2 complex challenges: connectivity and cybersecurity. But it's not an impossible task. There are policies and partnerships that can help us succeed. To meet the digital connectivity challenge, governments must rapidly stimulate investment to allow widespread access to secure, reliable fiber, 5G networks, and Wi-Fi 6. This can be done by adopting regulatory frameworks that incentivize investment, ensure spectrum availability, and make public funding available for rural areas. However, as governments move toward the development of advanced wireless networks, they are increasingly under pressure to, quote, win the race for 5G, end quote. Treating 5G as a race is very dangerous. It risks trading away the security of the networks that will power critical infrastructure and transmit sensitive data for decades. We can't trade security for expedience. And as we navigate the technical risks from the 5G supply chain, we must also confront non-technical risks from government policies that can distort the market. Now more than ever, it's crucial that governments with shared values and closely connected markets, such as the members of the OAS, work together to avoid those pitfalls. Doing so will help insulate our countries and economies from cyber attacks. At Cisco alone, we block 20 billion cyber threats every single day. And in terms of actual attacks, we expect they will grow to 15.4 million by the year 2023. At the same time, foreign threats are also increasing, and governments have the responsibility of protecting their countries from such intrusions on networks. Tackling all of this takes a multi-pronged approach. Governments must ensure appropriate guidance on cybersecurity is followed, critical infrastructure is protected, and strategies are in place to tackle malicious actors. And remember, no one country, organization, company, or person has to take this challenge on alone. As the Secretary said, a team sport. Together, we can increase threat awareness and improve cybersecurity within the Western Hemisphere. Already, the multidimensional security work done through the OAS Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism has helped establish a more secure ecosystem. Simply put, the contributions by the OAS are highly valued among member countries, and global companies. It's why Cisco, as the world's largest security company, was honored to launch our partnership with the OAS to create the Cybersecurity Innovation Councils in Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, and Chile. These councils will serve as spaces where leaders and experts from the private and public sectors, academia, and NGOs can collaborate to drive innovation, raise awareness, and expand best practices. It will allow us to mitigate digital risks and bring digital solutions to the challenges facing our societies. These councils will also set a global example of how governments, businesses, and citizens can take full advantage of the digital economy by working together. And I'm proud to share that the first Innovation Councils took place this month virtually in Mexico and Colombia, with Secretary Urrutia hosting both. We thank her for her leadership on this significant issue. But to continue at the record pace of innovation and digitization the world is witnessing, we must invest in our future. By partnering with the tech industry, governments can embrace digital skills training and adopt platforms to establish the next generation of technology professionals. Taken as a whole, these efforts will empower governments and communities to bolster their economies, increase productivity, advance sustainability, and create an inclusive, more secure future. When the pandemic started and we shifted to online ways of working and learning, the imperative was connecting everything up at scale. But now it's time for us to settle in for longer-term changes, and we have to work together to secure these vital connections. Otherwise, these important facets of society will be attacked and disrupted. To drive lasting impact, it's not a one-and-done effort. It's a holistic approach that utilizes partnerships and solutions. The private and public sectors have an opportunity to do way more for the world than ever thought possible, particularly on cybersecurity. I want to thank everyone who is participating in this week's event and helping drive cyber awareness and adoption. I'd like to conclude again by thanking Secretary Weintraub and the OAS team for their trust. Cisco looks forward to furthering our collective efforts in the Western Hemisphere. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the symposium.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your kind words. And I would actually like to take the opportunity to also mention the partnership that we have with Cisco, in which we have extended our cybersecurity interested in getting certification from the OAS and Cisco in cybersecurity essentials and in introduction to cybersecurity, you might do so at the OAS website in partnership with Cisco. Next in our agenda is Troels Oerting. Troels is presently the first head and chair of the Global Center for Cybersecurity established by the World Economic Forum in 2018. To mitigate the global challenges to security, privacy, and integrity imposed by the integrating global stakeholders in a worldwide platform for prevention, protection, and prosecution. He has been working in cybersecurity first line for the last 38 years and has held a number of significant posts both nationally and internationally. He also has an extensive network covering both public and private institutions. Before joining the World Economic Forum, Troels Oerting worked as Group Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, and Group Chief Security Officer with end-to-end responsibility of all security in Barclay Group, responsible for more than 3,000 security experts worldwide, protecting the bank's 50 million customers and 140,000 employees in 51 countries. We are proud to count with his presence in this cybersecurity opening ceremony for the symposium. And Troels, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Gabriela. And let me see if I appear on the screen. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Well, I will just continue then, and hopefully you can hear me in the other end. And thank you very much, Gabriela, for also inviting me to this very important symposium. OAS is a partner of the World Economic Forum already, and so is actually also Cisco and Microsoft, the previous speakers, and DHS as well. So we have full house, so to say, when it comes to partners in that respect. As you probably know, and which was also told by the previous speakers, for me, it's difficult to add anything significantly new to the three previous speakers about the various threats. But what I can say as an emphasis is that this is something that we need to do together. We should not, as security experts, sell fear or hide. We should instead try to protect hope. I firmly believe that the internet can bring a lot of good things to society. We might be able to cure cancer, dementia, and other things, but there is, of course, also a downside to the increased cyber. And what we have seen is, and what you will have to get used to is that everything will be connected, everything will be sensing, everything will be stored, and everything will be intelligent. And in this world with a huge attack vector, there will be many possibilities for the bad people to take advantage of the good people. So we have to work together. The World Economic Forum is doing this because we are, I believe, the only platform that can encompass both big corporations, civil society, and governments in one platform. So I still remember when I was in the law enforcement, I had all the muscles in the world, but I had no information. When I was in Barclays, it was the opposite. I had all the information in the world, but no muscles. Now we need to do this together. So what was the world like previous to COVID? I think that when we make, and you know, every year we do a risk assessment where we interview the 1,600 CEOs from the biggest companies in the world and ask them what keep you awake during night. And the result just before the COVID pandemic came was that out of 10 risks that kept them awake, cyber had an influence in 3 out of 10. Number 2, number 7, and number 9. So we're not alone in considering that cyber needs to be also protected and that we need to integrate security by design. What are the forces then that will change the picture in the coming years and will make the fourth industrial revolution pick up pace? Before the pandemic, there were 4 major drivers. The first one was the one that Michael also touched upon. That was the change from us using computers to using mobile systems and 5G. This will increase the internet population from approximately 3.4 billion to almost 7 billion in the coming years. More customers, more work, more reach, but also more criminals. The second driver is the connection of everything, the internet of everything. Everybody predicts that we will have approximately 55 billion devices connected to the internet by 2024, and 80% of those will not have any communication with a human being. So everything will be connected, and that will create a lot of traffic, a lot of information, and a lot of things that will be stored. All these information now, and all this traffic, and all these footprints from both mobile devices and the IoT will, in the old days, not have the ability of being stored because storage was expensive and cumbersome. Now we have cloud services operating all over the world, and it's easy and cheap. So everything that we collect, we will store. And the fourth driver will be AI and machine learning, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Those who possesses the ability to crunch this big amount of data will also be the one that will win the game and be best off in competition, because you will make a much easier KYC. You'll be able to utilize these data very, very rapidly. On the downside is that the criminals, of course, are also using adversarial AI already, and they don't have any GDPR and data protection legislations to live up to. They just have the green. So after this, we suddenly saw COVID, and I know that many of my previous colleagues that spoke previously have outlined what happened after this. But let me again rephrase this a bit, because what happened was that the digital transformation was basically put on steroids. They took up pace in an unprecedented scale that we haven't seen before, and that gave us also some kind of complications which we are still struggling. So first of all, you and I have no influence in the innovation. Innovation will continue regardless of regulation, regardless of nation states. They're trying to see if they can regulate some of the areas. Innovation will continue. We will get more and more connected. And you can see that also by the spending. I think that the spending right now is $120 billion per year in cybersecurity solutions. And the damage towards us, either in costs or repair from cyber attacks, is reaching $5 trillion. So there is a lot of things going on, and there is a lot of things that we need to work, as the previous speaker said, together. This cannot be done alone. This should not be done alone. The problem is, however, that right now we have geopolitical tensions at a magnitude that we haven't seen it before. And you see that US, China, Europe, and Russia have tense cooperation, and that will not improve any kind of, let's say, cooperation between law enforcement. And the only one who will really benefit from this situation is the cyber criminals. I hate to admit it, but it's actually almost a risk-free crime to be a cyber criminal these days. We need to change this, and that's also why we in the World Economic Forum try to create this platform where we will meet with law enforcement, not just from the Western countries, but also from Russia, China, and other interested countries. The good thing, however, in the geopolitical changes is that it seems like Israel is now talking easier to its Arab neighbors, and that is a good sign, of course. But what happened when the COVID entered the scene? First of all, I can tell you that nobody was prepared. It might be that somebody said they were prepared, nobody was prepared. No nation was prepared, nobody was prepared. We have never closed down a whole globe and asked everybody to go home, to sit home, to not to travel, to wear all kinds of protection means and social distancing. The good thing, however, was that the criminals were also not prepared. So we had to make a rapid change and transformation to close the communication gap. And everybody had, and the businesses, they actually over 3 weeks sent home 1.2 billion people to work from their homes, and these people used to work in offices previously. But we sent them, the people, home, but we also connected them. And we did that actually very, very fast. 3 weeks we were up and running with communication tools and almost the same productivity as previously in these branches. Unfortunately, what we did was also that we sent people home unprepared, with no prepared policies, with no prepared hardware and software. And that was a mistake, of course, but that was the only solution we had. But because the criminals were not really prepared, the only thing we saw was an uptick in the mainstream crime these days. And this is what you see. You see an uptick in the normal crime, as Secretary Nielsen also stated, phishing emails and other things. But this will not last. Also, the criminals are preparing for the future, and this will be the new normal. So I guess that what we are seeing now is that we have seen a 3 years digital transformation taking place in 3 months. We've seen the uptick of tools like the one that we are speaking on now, Zoom, Teams, and other tools. And there is a need for this, and this will be the new normal. We will not go back to the offices. I don't think that we will stay at home either, but we will have a much more flexible work life in the future, and that demands a new set of tools. The criminals will, of course, try to take advantage of this. And you will see that both criminal groups and nation states in these days are planning the next steps and how to exploit this new, huge and broad attack vector that we have created. So there is another thing that has changed. In the old days, criminals were looking for specific things that they wanted to obtain. It could be IPI, it could be money, credit card information, or digital identities, or other things. Now, because we are also dependent just on the availability of the internet to communicate, to train, to exchange, to do marketing, whatever, now there is a new cash cow in the criminal market. The cash cow is ransomware. You've seen an uptick, I think, over 900% just this year in ransomware attacks. That's because we are all dependent on the availability of the internet. And I think that what you will see is that this will be followed by DDoS attack that is also attacking the availability of the internet. So more threats will emerge, and you will also see that there will be more threats where individual workers working from home will be blackmailed to do something they normally won't do on the internet, because now they are out of reach from their normal security systems, and you will see that this could be something that you will also see criminal groups do. So this new normal is that we have to live with this, and we have to keep up pace, and we have to improvise, overcome, and adapt. And we have to do this fast and secure. Law enforcement will not be able to help anybody on the short term, and probably not even on the midterm. Hopefully in the long term. We need to change that narrative that we cannot fight crime together because we are afraid that this is connected to state activities. And we at the World Economic Forum is trying now to see if we can find new avenues for international cooperation that will enable us to do more prevention, to include security by design, to make sure that we are focusing on the positive parts of the internet. Because the development and the change will happen, and we just need to make sure that it happens in a secure and a safe way. If not, we will lose trust and faith in the internet, and then it will not be used in the same way as it should be. So I hope that we, at least in this setting, can agree that regardless of if we are citizen in Russia, China, US, or Colombia or Denmark, that we will all have a right to do our work on the internet without being a victim of crime. There will, of course, be nation-state activities. There's always been nation-state activities also before the internet and probably also after, and we have to find norms and rules for them as well. In the meantime, I think that I will take up both what Kirstjen said and Michael said, is that we need to work together. We are here to work together with everybody that wants to make the internet safer tomorrow than today. And with these words, I give the floor back to the arrangers, to Gabriella, and I will say thank you to all of you for listening to me, and I hope you will have a successful conference, and we will prevail. I guarantee that we will survive the internet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Troels, for those words, and I would actually like to recount some of what you said, and I think what's really good about the OAS into the table during the opening ceremony, but also to the closed sessions that we have. And for that reason, we have the World Economic Forum represented here. We also have Secretary Nielsen, who also brings a perspective from the government side, and we have AWS, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Services, and Cisco representing the private sector. And I think we can all agree that it is necessary to combine efforts to not only survive the internet, like you mentioned, but also continue creating awareness about these issues. So thank you very much for that. And with that said, I would like to introduce our last speaker, who is Bill Shen is a senior principal architect with AWS Security, and he leads the worldwide technical field for security and compliance at AWS. Bill is responsible for helping customers set their organizational and technical security strategy as they migrate their businesses to AWS. Bill has been with Amazon Web Services since 2012 and works in the office of the Cybersecurity Security Officer. In this capacity, Bill works directly with the security leadership of our customers, support the global policy of AWS, as well as interfaces with the service teams to continually innovate on behalf of AWS customers and their opportunities to be more secure in the cloud. Prior to the AWS, Bill spent over 12 years managing and leading information security operations and architecture initiatives at some of the largest U.S. financial institutions, including U.S. Bank and J.P. Morgan Chase. Bill, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm not able to share my screen, so perhaps they can enable my screen sharing.
Yes, we will fix that. Give us just 1 second.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gabriella, and thank you to the Organization of American States for hosting AWS. I believe this is the 4th time that we've been able to attend and to sponsor the event, and it's a great pleasure to speak to such a large audience of dedicated professionals seeking to make the internet more safe and more secure. I was asked to give a practical talk on cloud security today because of digital transformation and because of the last 14 years of cloud and evolution of the large hyperscale cloud providers has become such an important part of our digital economy and our lifestyles. I was asked to present some practical considerations today for helping folks be secure in the cloud. So what we've heard from others, from Cisco, from Microsoft, from Troels and others about the threats that exist today and how those threats are increasing, I thought it important to talk about the fundamentals. And I have the pleasure of a fairly unique vantage point of talking to thousands of AWS customers around the world as they move their businesses and their organizations and their citizens to the cloud. I've been here for 8 years, and it always comes down to basic hygiene and fundamentals and being the most important investments that any organization can make in cloud adoption or in cybersecurity. We release 3 to 5 to sometimes 7 to 10 features and services every single day that customers can benefit from. But the most important parts are that hygiene and fundamental security. The basics are still very, very important. Jeff Bezos, our founder, has lots of great quotes, but one of the ones I frequently refer to is this, that we often look at especially in security, as the new shiny object, or the thing that's new and exciting today, of what's going to change and what's going to be an emerging threat or an emerging solution. But it's very important to also ask the question of what's not going to change in the next 10 years. And that comes down to the security fundamentals. I think most of this audience have been risk and security professionals for most of their career. And the things that don't change are the fundamentals that everyone should get right. Our Chief Information Security Officer, Steve Schmidt, my boss, spoke last year at our first inaugural security conference and talked about the top 10 things your security team should be focusing on today. And these are very simple. Even for a non-technical audience or someone who is in the role of governance or risk and compliance, these fundamental basic top 10 security things that people should be focusing on should seem very important to you today. When you're working with a cloud service provider or a managed service provider, keeping your account information and the relationship accurate is extremely important. As a cloud provider, the one thing we want to get right is being able to get a hold of you and be able to give you actionable information and intelligence when there are threats present to your business or your organization. Things like multi-factor authentication or centralized logging are absolutely critical, and the technology exists today to make things possible. It used to be, one of the benefits of cloud is the cost advantage, so being able to be more secure at a much, much lower cost. Things like multi-factor authentication, centralized logging, and limiting network access are now a task in software development, and they're things that you used to have to buy capital expenditure and millions of dollars of hardware to get right. With the advent of cloud, and it's not just AWS, but any major cloud provider, making these things possible is now simple, and everyone should take away these top 10 actionable items to focus on as you think about the threats that others have presented about and spoken about today. The last point on this slide is that security is now deep in the development lifecycle. And what that means is that security is not an afterthought. And the other speakers, particularly Secretary Nielsen, spoke about security by design, and security from the Microsoft speaker as well, talked about making sure that security is deep in the way that you build and that you navigate the new digital economy. I'll talk a little bit more about that now. The traits that I've seen in highly successful cloud security organizations, what I mean by this is, what does highly successful mean? It means that you're realizing the benefits of cloud adoption while also improving security and risk management. These traits start with forward-leaning with legal and audit, so that as our customers and organizations and governments and private sector companies around the world move into cloud, the ones that are most successful, the ones that get the benefits while increasing their risk management posture, have leaned in with legal and audit. I had the pleasure of working with Troels, actually, at Barclays, and they're a great example of someone who looked at the regulatory landscape and saw what the challenges might be to successful cloud adoption. They leaned in with audit, they leaned in with regulatory authorities, and we worked together to make sure that there was a regulatory framework that supported cloud adoption while still remaining secure. I talked to a lot of customers who start their cloud adoption journey with IT or with technologists, and I joke that mom and dad are going to find out. And so it's very important to bring in the security professionals, the legal and audit and compliance folks very, very early in that adoption. It means that you have the contracts, the procurement, the regulatory authority to take risks and to do innovative things without moving too quickly. The second thing that I see in highly successful cloud customers is a high cadence of risk decisions. IT doesn't move slowly anymore. It moves very, very quickly. Technology changes rapidly, and those companies and organizations and groups that can make decisions quickly are the ones that will be successful. And often this results in a deference to expertise. No longer is it sufficient to have a quarterly risk committee. It's important to get the right people in the room, making the right risk decisions very, very quickly. The third trait, and I've alluded to this before, is that companies and organizations that are moving to the cloud, the security organizations within those groups have a deep relationship with their software engineering partners if they are going to be successful. So what does this really mean? It means that the development pipeline is no longer a waterfall methodology. It doesn't take quarterly releases of software. People are using continuous integration and deployment pipelines to innovate and to deploy code every single day, sometimes dozens or hundreds of times a day. If security is not in that development pipeline, if they're not working in the same source code repositories as the rest of the organization, then security is going to be an afterthought. Security has to learn to what some in the industry call shifting left, and they need to treat their workloads and their security controls as code too. This means that security professionals have a changing staffing and talent management problems and challenges. Recruiting security professionals who can also work in software environments is a challenge for the industry. It means that we need to work together to educate the next generation of software developers and security professionals, starting even in elementary or in high school or universities. We need to work together as organizations across the world to make sure we educate the generation of the future to be able to do security in a software-driven world. One of the things we look for at AWS is feedback loops and making sure that we have the right security talent working in the software development pipelines. I'll give a quick example of what we look for in an application security engineer at AWS. And this comes back to the concept of talent and to growing the next security leadership of the future. We want our security engineers to have a deep understanding of our services and our internal systems. That is to say, they don't look at a service or a launch of a product at the end of its development lifecycle, they're in there at the beginning. Our application security engineers have a motto of ship secure code. It's very important to look at both of those words. We have to ship code. As a business, our job is to release software every single day. If we can't do that, we don't have a business and we don't have the trust of our customers, but it also has to be secure. So our teams understand that they have to innovate alongside of our service teams and our software engineers and contribute to their roadmaps to make sure that what we ship is indeed secure. The people that we hire and then we train and we develop are relentlessly curious. We want engineers who are constantly turning over stones, the ones that are looking for defects and for opportunities to make our services more secure. They also have to have a penchant for automation. If you look at the size and scale of the hyperscale cloud providers today, there is no way we could manage these things manually. We have to build automation. So looking for engineers and for software architects and security professionals who can build, we want them to automate things at scale. When you have millions and millions of systems, you have to automate. I'll return to this concept of feedback loops. This is the way that we work with our service teams is that at the end of every security review, we ask them to take a simple survey. And we ask the question of their overall experience with AWS security during this software security review was good, great, okay, or poor. And we dive into the details of these responses very, very carefully. If we see that a security review did not go well, we want to dive in, we want to work backwards from that internal customer and find out what went wrong. Most of the time we get them pretty well. But I think the important part is to dive into anywhere where that experience was not optimal. We think that if people want to come to the table to work with security engineers, they're more likely to make a secure product. We talk a lot at Amazon about durable advantages. So I'd like to close with a couple of trends. Now that we've talked about the traits of highly successful cloud customers, we'll talk a little bit about the trends in cloud security that we're seeing today from our vantage point. Software pipelines are the new factory floor. That as we build new digital economies on top of cloud and on top of new technology, software is what's driving that. So if security and risk professionals are not deeply invested in the software pipelines, if you're not sure how software is built and deployed today, it's important as a security professional to really deeply understand how that software is shipped and delivered. We're seeing broad evolutions in cryptography today. TLS 1.3 is coming, as is quantum safe cryptography. AWS is working with NIST as well as other major, Microsoft, Google as well, are also submitting submissions to NIST and to other cryptographic validation agencies for quantum safe cryptography. This goes back to why the software pipeline is so important, that as these new cryptographic ciphers and algorithms emerge, it's very important to be able to deploy them quickly. It takes a long time for cryptographic standards to be developed. It takes even longer, much, much longer, for the new software to support those cryptographic principles to be deployed. So as a security professional, being able to move fast and move quickly to deploy new safe cryptography is extremely important and will be critical to the safety of the internet. Finally, we're seeing the emergence of what we call formal proofing and automated reasoning. It's a trend in security that because everything is almost entirely software now for most customers and organizations, you can execute code and you can reason about the correctness of that code using logic models and mathematical proofs. Before, when things were built on hardware and patch panels and network cables, you had to have a human to go reason about the correctness of an architecture. Now that things are developed in software, it's possible to prove things logically using formal proofing and automated reasoning. So thank you very, very much. I'll conclude my remarks by thanking the Organization of American States for our participation and to keeping the internet safer as a whole. Thank you, Gabrielle.
Thank you very much, Bill. That was a very insightful presentation, and I believe that all of the participants and attendees will benefit from your remarks as well as the other panelists. So before we close, we would actually like to, first of all, thank you to the OAS team for making this possible. We would also like to thank our Bill, Troels, Michael, Valecia, Kirstjen, for making this possible and sharing your incredible remarks with all of us. And last but not least, to the attendees who we had throughout the event. We reached 1,000 people who I believe were very interested and engaged throughout the session. Before we leave, we would actually like to extend our invitation to join us at 12 p.m., where we will be presenting strengthen cybersecurity education's efforts in Latin America and the Caribbean to address the cybersecurity gap. I will be leaving the link on the chat in case any of you want to join, but thank you so much for making this opening of the Cybersecurity Symposium 2020 a great success. I wish you all a great day, and I hope you all stay cyber secure. Thank you.